with Con Sweeney. Now to what we're about tonight. We're a monthly show based here on the Second Life, in Second Life. We broadcast live here from Facebook and YouTube every third Monday of the month at 6 p.m. Second Life time or Pacific time for you folks in real life. We meet mystery authors and others from the publishing world to talk about books and the issues facing them today, social and technological change. And there's certainly been a lot of those lately. I'd like to thank Droxter Desprez, host of the Second Life Book Club and the Drax Files Radio Hour, both broadcasts from Second Life, for his sponsorship and the use of Book Club Island. I'd also like to thank Strawberry Linden and Brett Linden for their help in setting this show up. And finally, my eternal thanks to Becky Hansen and Isabel Charon for all their technical assistance in making this happen. Without you, it wouldn't have been possible. A special thanks to Isabel for getting up at 1 o'clock in the morning her time to run the camera. Now, our regular viewers may notice that we're no longer on Book Club Island. The reason being that there's a lot going on over there these days, and setting up for our show is becoming a bit of an effort. So we decided to go to our own studio. More about this in future broadcasts. Now, allow me to introduce this evening's guest, Kelly McClymer, author of the popular Secret Shopper Mom Mysteries and Historical Romances. Kelly is also a writing coach, and I'll ask her to talk more about this in a bit. Welcome, Kelly. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for inviting me here, Con.
Oh, our pleasure. Our pleasure. How does it feel to be in world in Second Life?
You know what's really nice is it's late enough here that I probably wouldn't be all that comfortable dressed in my outfit, but I don't have to be because my avatar is fine.
Oh, that's good. Kelly, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your life has been like as a writer since the pandemic began?
So I have always wanted to write, and I've been writing pretty much nonstop since I was in high school. I started with the high school newspaper and have been writing various things ever since. It did take me a long time to get published. And I thought, that was the biggest dry spell I was going to ever have, is that long period of time when I was writing and submitting and getting rejections and close enoughs, but not quite. I have to say the pandemic has really been a challenge for the creativity. I meet up with some other writers, and there's a friend of mine who, in the 20 years I've known her, has never had any difficulty writing. And she actually, I won't say missed a deadline, but pushed the deadline back a little bit with intentionality for the first time ever. And we've been talking about that. There's like this low level intensity of always looking around to try and figure out what happens that keeps you from getting really deep into the creative well.
You know, you're not the only writer who's told me this. Many have spoken about how one would think that with the lockdowns and everything, that this would be bliss for all writers. You could just stay at home and write. And there have been a few who said that, they're where they are right now in their creative process and work for them. But the vast majority of writers that I'm meeting are saying, this is tough. This isn't easy.
And I have a very nice writing office in my house, and my children are grown, so I would have said, oh, this would be perfect. But I do tend to get distracted. And one of my techniques has always been to run to a coffee shop. And I haven't been able to do that in 18 months.
Yeah, I know. I sympathize with you there. I was going through cold turkey with Starbucks at the beginning of this. So Kelly, could you tell us about your latest book? Your inspiration for the series, and how do you do the research for these books?
So I write a lot of different things, and I'm just going to focus on the mystery right now since you're mystery.
Please.
And I will say that my Secret Shopper Mom mysteries were very fun to research because I actually did mystery shopping. And I would say that I had a lot of preconceptions about what mystery shopping would be like. And I took these jobs, and first of all, they didn't pay very well, and they were a little bit precise about the directions you had to follow. But I learned a lot about exactly why mystery shoppers are hired, and the fact that a good manager has everybody following the rules and working together. And so that, Starbucks experience is seamless. That's why people will, look up when you come in the door and say hello, or they won't. As a
Hmm.
mystery shopper, you notice things like that. You're like, oh, they did not greet me, or they did not say the things they're supposed to say. And, a lot of times it's a little thing and it doesn't really throw you off as a customer. But occasionally, when they're really off kilter, you can feel it. Everything takes longer to do. You might have three employees talking to you instead of one. So I found I really started to appreciate more how hard it is to do something that seems very simple, like McDonald's or Starbucks, or a little store where they just sell sporting goods, and you're thinking, well, it's a small store, it can't be that hard. But that's just not true. It's constant work.
Yeah, I have nothing but respect for the people who work in stores like Starbucks because I will admit here publicly, I'm addicted to Starbucks. And I have been in Starbucks shops all over the world, and the experience is very similar. I mean, there's regional variations. Like if you go into a Starbucks in Tokyo, they greet you like you're going into a sushi restaurant, but and they all yell goodbye when you walk out. But
Right.
it's it takes practice, and you're right. The manager has to train everybody. Uh, and I've been in those shops long enough to notice that they start, the first thing they do is they start lugging ice from the back up front to make whatever it is they make. Then they graduate up to the next thing. Then they go on to the thing from there. And it's tough work. I don't think I could do it. But I,
Very detail oriented.
yeah.
When you make a drink, you clean up after it. Every surface is supposed to be cleaned on a regular basis. And if your customers get slow down, then you go out and you sweep and you clean the tables, and it's it's really interesting. And so my character reflects some of that. So she's not a snarky secret shopper. It was another series I read. I'm like, oh no, someone else is doing this, but she's completely different, and she's in fashion and much snarkier. And my character is just a mom trying to make a little money around, carting her kids around and figuring out how to use one car and get everywhere she needs to go. And she has a appreciation for these people, and she's also very nosy, and she also seems to have, like many book characters, a predilection for being in the wrong place at the right time. So she gets to see murders and suspicious happenings. So it's been kind of fun. I always said when I started writing I'd never be able to write a mystery, and a friend challenged me, and she said, I know you can. So I tried it, and it was fun. And there's always a lot of mystery in everything I write. I like to sort of reveal things slowly, but a mystery is different. Your readers have different expectations. You've got to be planting your clues and making sure they're clear enough, but not too clear. And it it was really challenging. And so the funny thing is, so right now, Molly is at the end of, I'm working on book 4,
Mhm.
and Molly is going to be shifting at the end of this book. Her big nemesis, the PTA president, who's all perfect and everything, is turning out not to have such a perfect life. And I don't know if I should tell people this because it's
Well,
going to take
go ahead.
get it done. But so Molly is going to shift over to start doing actual real detective work for the moms in the neighborhood and the PTA. So in book 5, this is going to be the shift because I'm like, oh, there's only so much mystery shopping you can do. After a while, it gets repetitive. And it seemed like, at this point, she's really going to grow into her own little entrepreneurial thing. And I'm kind of excited about it because it's going to let me get really domestic and a little more Miss Marple than I have been. So I'm kind of excited about that. But I got to finish book 4 and get it edited first. So.
Yeah, what I like about your stories, the the protagonist is an ordinary person, middle class mom, soccer mom, one car, juggling her life, trying to make a little extra money on the side. Um, Not a superhero. Uh, it it's an ordinary person. I guess it fits perfectly into the mold of the cozy mystery.
And that's the thing I like about cozy mysteries is that it is just regular people who notice things that end up, well, sometimes they end up dead, but if they're the main character, they usually stay alive. And I think, it's people are interesting. So, and there's a lot to explore in neighborhoods. And I know there's a tendency, like with the HBO, to make it high drama, but that's what I like about the cozy mystery. It isn't high drama, but it's a lot of making assumptions and then finding out, oh, that assumption was wrong, or maybe, oh, that assumption was right on, and I guessed who the murderer was. And I that's one of my favorite things to do. I like thrillers, but I much rather do the cozy thing with the real people because it makes you start looking at your neighbors thinking, it's like the Jimmy Stewart movie Rear Window.
Yes.
It's like, I don't think if I break my leg, I'm going to get a telescope and look outside because I think I will start really, really worrying about the state of the world.
Well, I'll probably get in trouble with some potential guests on my show, but I prefer the cozy mystery to the thriller. The characters I can relate to. The superhero who is a former CIA agent, SEAL, whatever, who's saving the world from the next villain and the atomic weapon. Yeah, those stories really don't do anything for me. But the cozy mystery, the small town, the family aspect of it. Um, there was one series that I read, way back when, in the beginning, when I first started um, reading mysteries, called The Suburban Dad. And sadly, I forget the name of the author. And it was all about a guy who he was working on Wall Street. He was a broker, and he got mixed up with insider trading, which in the 90s was a big thing. And he ended up in New Jersey, struggling to take care of his family with a station wagon that could barely make it. Uh, and I could relate to those characters. It was a simple series of stories that I enjoyed. Unfortunately, they only did about 6 books, and nothing came of it. Now, Kelly, I've noticed that you do write your series, the Mystery Shopping Mom. You've also written other books. Can you explain to me the difference or your preference between a series versus a once-off novel, or is it all the same to you?
So, first of all, you learn in publishing that readers often like series, and sometimes if you've got them interested in what you're doing, then you want to offer them more opportunities to be in that world. I mean, when I told my daughter that VC Andrews was actually dead and someone else was finishing her books and writing more, she was extremely upset about that. And it was the first time I realized that publishers did that, and it made me actually really respect the fact that series speak to readers. And I myself, when I was a child, the way that I would read is I would go to the library and I would look for, just down the shelf to find the book that I wanted. And, basically read all the shelves. But there was nothing I liked better than when I liked a book to see there were, 8, 10, 12 more of those books. And I would, get to stay with that character.
I
That
I,
said,
I enjoy that
I
too.
just want to say about the standalone is some books need to be standalone. they're exploring one thing, like Gun Girl. That did not ever need to be a series. That was very complete in one novel. Other things, Harry Potter needed to be a series. We needed to see him get through school.
That we did, and I'm glad he did. Switching gears here on you, Kelly, for a moment, could you talk to us about your coaching business, which also I know takes up a lot of your time?
Well, just I've had so much experience with the writing, the ins and outs, and watching people get confused about what decisions to make and listening to, well, I've heard a lot of bad advice. Let me put it that way. And the funny thing about advice is when you're a writer is there may be advice that's really good for you that you can't hear because it sounds too hard. And there may be some advice that sounds perfect for you because it's simple. And if you do it, it will freeze you up. And it just depends on who you are, what you want to do. So just recently, I decided I'm going to just throw my hat in this coaching ring. I'm good at it. All of my friends tell me I'm good at it. And I'm just going to see if I can help, especially given the absolute tsunami shift that we've had since self-publishing has gotten to be easier and there's a lot more information about how to write your books well and how to make your readers happy. And some of it is good and some of it is bad. A lot of it is very good. And I do think that most writers eventually figure it out if they work hard enough. But I don't mind helping them take some shortcuts because I just early on when I was working, in traditional publishing model before self-publishing was actually a thing, I saw a lot of people who wrote beautiful books that they could never get in front of readers. And I know the readers would have liked them. So I just want to help those people get their books out there and get them in front of readers.
Do you have a specific client in mind for your business, or is it open to all comers?
Well, the funny thing about it is, what I really want is someone who really wants to, they want to write a good book, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so they're willing to put in the work. But I actually, because I've been working in the entrepreneurial space, I have this two different shifts. I have the people who want to write fiction or memoirs, which are books that are, they're harder to get your audience for. They're a little harder to make money with. You can, and I'm not saying you can't. You can make really good money, but not necessarily always. So you have to kind of take it on faith that you know what you're doing. And then the business writers. So I have two sets of clientele, and I was asking myself this question. It's like, why do I have these two? And it's because they basically come from the same place of I talk to people and I see how badly they want to write this book. And I talk to business people and I see how badly they want to communicate what they do to their customers. And okay, so really, I just have two groups who want to do the same thing very badly, get down on paper what they do so that they can just take a deep breath and hand a book to somebody instead of explain it over and over again. And writers are terrible. You've talked to writers, so you know we will tell you our story if you don't stop us.
Which around here is a good thing.
I don't know. I think it's much better to read it than to be told it, especially, if you're in a bar and I'm just telling you the parts that I was really interested in, because you're not going to have a clue what the whole book is.
Sure.
Books have this really nice shape. What an author does is take you by the hand, welcome you, and walk you through their world all the way to the end, where they either shove you out the door or give you a big hug or whatever, depending on the book. And when I'm telling people about my book, I am bouncing all over the place.
That's good. That's good. I look forward to running into you in a bar someday. Uh, Now, Kelly, so far you've made few passing references to the difficulty in getting published, the rise of self-publishing to a more viable form than it used to be. The full-time writer, uh, are they going to become extinct except for the megastars that are out there? There are many pressures taking place right now in the publishing industry. You got the consolidation to I think the last time I looked, the big four publishing houses. I'm hearing that agents are leaving the business, especially with the pandemic. Uh, it seems that I run into more and more writers. I sit on the board of directors of the Mystery Writers of America in New York, and I meet more and more writers who seem to have longer and longer lists of rejection letters from agents or publishers. What do you think that the full-time writer is viable going forward?
I thought that the publishing world will change. Now, first, my experience with self-publishing began after I got the rights back to a traditionally published series, my historical romance series, and self-published it. And other people were doing it, and I thought, well, why not? My publisher wasn't interested in selling it anymore. Why don't I? And that was about 12 years ago. And at the time, I thought, this is a lot easier. Getting your book right and talking to readers is a lot easier than writing what you think is a good book and sending it to an agent who doesn't read it, isn't interested, has read too many of the same kind of book. I mean, and publishers have a limit to what they can publish, and they try not to put out 10 books in the same thing the same month. Readers don't care. And so I really thought that after a dozen years that it would be clearer. And I think what I see in the conversation of writers is that the marketing part of the books is just really tough. Writers, most writers just want to write it and then have it sell itself. And the funny thing is, because I am in the entrepreneurial space, I see the same thing about businesses. A restaurant just wants to open and have people walk in the door and eat and love the food. And it doesn't work that way either. You have to do your marketing. So, what I kind of envision, and I think I may be the only one, because I'm not seeing businesses that do this, is that what we really need to replace the agents and publishers, and I don't mean permanently, like some of these publishers and agents could do this too if they love this part of the business, is do the marketing piece for the writers and take a commensurate, it's like right now Amazon is giving a lot of writers 70%, but there's parameters on that, and sometimes it drops to 35%. And if you're doing the Kindle Unlimited, where it's less than that. So writers will take very little money. We just want the readers to get our books. And one of the things that someone who does the math said 10 years ago is that what a writer needs to make a living as a writer is to have about 10,000 fans who want to read what they write. Because if you can put a book out and make $2 on it, after all the costs and everything, right? So it's not pricing it at $2. I'm
Mhm.
getting into the weeds, but I'm doing that because I'm making a point. And you have 10,000 readers, then you've made $20,000. And that's not a lot of money to most people. But to writers, it is, because publishers kept us poor for a really long time. Most writers do not make that amount of money when they first start. It's like the sports business where, the whatever they call them, the baseball leagues that are not the AAA ball.
The minors?
The minor leagues, yeah, they're not making a lot of money and they're on the road a lot, and but they're all doing that because A, they love to play the game, and B, they're hoping to hit it into the major leagues where they'll make so much money. Most of them don't, but they still love the game and they get to play it. So I guess that's what I see. I see people who just love writing and are willing to grow their readership and keep their 10,000 readers happy. And I see people who have superior marketing chops and are making, millions. And then I see people who struggle, who don't know how to market the books and get very discouraged. And because I've been in traditional publishing, I can say to them, you could be in that same position with a publisher. A publisher does not guarantee you success. It doesn't guarantee you money. It doesn't guarantee you a next contract. And so I really do see that marketing is the piece. Uh, well, that and editing.
I, I
You need
yeah,
that.
I know. I agree with you, and I work with many writers in my other day job, and what I've heard from them and learned is that the publishers do nothing to promote writers' books unless you happen to be one of the mega stars. Your Stephen King, J.K. Rowling, James Patterson, your books are all over the place. Everybody else, they leave it to the individual writer. Uh, and many writers, they unfortunately feel like what you said, they've written the book, well, somebody else can sell it for me, right? And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. You've got to get out there and build your audience. And you're right. If you could get 10,000 fans, I could do better for you than $20,000. But many,
Well,
but
most people can. If you could do your 10,000 fans, you can make better than that.
yeah, and sadly, I've met writers who've sold tens of thousands of books, and then when I ask them about their email list or their social media community, they've got maybe a couple hundred names on their email list, mostly their immediate family. Uh, they'll have maybe a couple hundred, couple thousand people on social media, and that's it. And it's the marketing piece that's missing here because, like you, I've seen some very good writing, and I'm just looking at the writers and I'm like, you don't have any kind of an audience here.
And it's two different skills, right?
Yes.
And so I have a lot of sympathy uh,
Yeah.
because I struggle with this myself. There are times when I really pay attention, and there are times when I'm like, this is too hard, and the sometimes you want to be down in the writing cave writing, and you don't want to have to think about making social media posts. So, I mean, there are support systems that are popping up, and they actually, they'll support a traditional writer and they'll support a self-publishing writer, but most of the time they're going to prefer to support the self-publishing writer because the self-publishing writer has the ability to actually control the money, so they can change the pricing, they can do, a pop-up deal for visibility. All of those things are within their control, whereas my friends with traditional publishers have to convince the publisher to do something. And publishers, they have concerns that we as self-publishers don't have. They maybe have competing writers. They can't be promoting both of them at the same time. They feel like, well, no, we're putting our efforts here. We don't have time to put our efforts for you right now. Whereas the writer wants to do something, and they just have to, be patient. They're not first in line, but if they publish themselves, they are.
Yeah, you're right. The publishing houses are bureaucracies. And with the consolidation of so many imprints into fewer and fewer publishing houses, you don't, the options that you had are no longer there. The small publishing house that would take in a writer, develop her or him, excuse me, and get them out there with an audience, those days are long gone. Um, the big ones are just interested in the sure thing. Um,
There are some small publishers that are popping up who are trying to do that. Um, they struggle with the same thing as the self-published authors do, is the marketing piece, right? There's a lot of knowledge, a lot of understanding of people in there. So the one thing I found out, I will say, when I did the switch over is that I suddenly recognized that publishers don't know anything about readers. And that was a big shock to me. But publishers distribute to booksellers and libraries and other big entities. They don't know the readers at all. So these smaller boutique publishers are stepping in to know the readers. And I think there is a place for them to take that uh, marketing burden, partner more with the writers. But you still have to be very careful because some of them may think they know how to market and then you find out they really don't.
Well, you touched on something else that's another problem for the writer today. So many independent bookshops have closed down in the last several years since the Great Recession in 2008, since we had the onslaught of Amazon in the latter part of the last century. E-readers have come along, and people are moving more to a digital format. And yes, I know in the press you hear stories of the small bookshop is coming back to life. Hard copy books are becoming more popular than before. But I think there's a trend here, and I think the trend is towards digital books. I think the trend is going to be to online purchasing. There's only one large bookstore chain left in America, Barnes and Noble, and even they're struggling. Though hopefully this recent acquisition by the British bookseller might make a difference, but I think the jury is still out there.
Well, I love Barnes and Noble, and I love, like, in Maine. There's still quite a few small bookshops that know the people who come in and read and can recommend. As a favorite thing to do is to go in and say, "Oh, what's new? What's good?" And get a personal recommendation. And that kind of went away with the Borders and Barnes and Noble. They tried it for a little while, but then they just started, stocking books from central headquarters, which is never a good idea.
Right.
But I think there's room for Barnes and Noble, especially to know the reader, to communicate with the reader, and to make something that actually is an engine for writers to connect with readers and readers to connect with the books. I mean, I think that's where it's going to come from because the publishers, they're not interested in pivoting to readers. I mean, I can understand it. If you deal with, libraries as a monolith and, big box bookstores as a monolith, it makes sense that you're not going to want to go to all the individual readers who complain about, why did you use this font in this book? you know,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yes.
you want to limit having to hear that complaint too many times. And so I think that, a bookseller is the perfect place. They want to please the readers. There are new ways to do this, and they need to step it up a little bit.
Well, hopefully Barnes and Noble, I've been reading and hearing they're making some changes. They're putting more control back in the hands of the local store manager. Several of my clients who, prior to the acquisition, who tried to approach Barnes and Noble to talk about doing readings or book events, they were brushed off. Now they go in, Barnes and Noble's happy to see them. They'll talk about events, they'll talk about book launches at the local level, which they haven't done for years. So
Yeah,
maybe,
it's been a long time since they did that. That's encouraging to hear. And of course, the small specialty bookstores have always loved to do that. You just have
Mhm.
to be brave enough to go in and talk to them. And that is not always something writers are good at. But, it's once you do it, you find out, oh, yeah, we love books. We have a shared understanding of how wonderful it is to have good books. So,
it's the flip sides of the same coin. One loves them and one loves to sell them. So yeah, there's mutual interest there. Hey, Kelly, what are the challenges that you're facing today yourself as a writer?
I do find that the marketing side of it reduces some of the joy of the storytelling. if I let it. So I do try not to let it do that too much, just because one of the things that happens in any business is that you will get, and this is kind of what sort of propelled me into coaching, to be honest, is that you hear people say, well, you have to write short and you have to release every 6 weeks, and you have to have a series, and it should be 8 to 10 books. I mean, really rigid advice. And that works for some people, and it's great if it works for you. But I know people who write really great books because it takes them 5 years to write those books. So I'd like to see a place for those people too, to be able to connect readers to that book that is not, that allows them to do it for themselves. And I do think that the people who, like you were saying, you talked about the difference between series and standalones. We're seeing a lot of series right now because it's a marketing technique. And I'm going to say most of the writers who are writing in series like to write in series, but I have talked to some writers who are like, I want to kill all these characters. I am so tired of writing about them, but they feel stuck because they're making money. And my advice is always, okay, just sell that series as it is and start something that gives you joy again, because I'm getting scared looking in your eyes.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Kelly, what trends do you see ahead in mystery publishing because of the pandemic? Do you think we'll ever get back to normal, whatever that was?
You know, the mystery, I think, is probably, I don't know whether mystery or romance came first, but it's been, I mean, I guess you could say the Odyssey is both a mystery and a romance, a
Hmm.
series of romances. So, and, a good old fashioned bloodbath occasionally too. So I just, I think that with having so many people able to write the stories that they're dreaming about and that they want to share, we're going to find new story. I don't want to say new stories in that sense, but new takes on stories and new ways to go about it. Because I love that publishers were curating, and I know that helped a lot to keep the, shelves from being full of books that were not edited properly. But readers, I think, can curate more than we give them credit for. And some of them, like, sometimes I look at Douglas Adams and I wonder how he ever got published. I know there were other Douglas Adams type books that I would have loved to read that didn't make it through, right? That's
Hmm.
his Hitchhiker Guide series was so strange, but so delightful. And I think there's more of that with more freedom. I
I
tell
see.
you, I've been doing this for a long time, right? So in romance, nobody could sell erotic books. No, we can't do that. It's forbidden. So then this little niche publisher came up, uh, Alora's Cave. I was like, oh, we can sell them, and they did. I mean, they sold them to the readers. And there was, it was when the digital books were just starting. And so it was like, oh, I don't have a lurid cover. No one can tell what I'm reading. And then the books took off, and people, writers were making a lot of money. And there were also some unfortunate business decisions made by that publisher. But then the major publishers were like, oh, well, people will read that. And then they started publishing erotic romance and literature, to the mainstream public, which was, it was just so funny because for a very long time, they were like, no one would buy it. No one will buy this. And then they got proven wrong in a hugely, hugely, oh my gosh, it was, people were making tons and tons of money. And then they came into it. And that is what we see sometimes when someone is really big, right? And so this is what I see is we have the possibilities to have, I mean, well, they're doing this, and I don't know how this is going to work. I watch it with interest, but the serialized fiction, and I know in Japan it's very popular
Hmm.
with the really short little installments.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's a fad or if that's, the new paperback. I don't know.
That's over there. That's been around for a long time. They even have it on TV. They had these little 15-minute soap operas in the morning that people would see before they go to work, and they're still very popular over there.
And I get hooked on those things, so I can see why they would. I don't know about reading, but the little short vignette videos where you like are, the story is like halfway what you're watching and halfway in between the two things that you're watching. I like that. It allows a lot of freedom of imagination.
It does. It does. I think there's some potential here to see some significant changes as we go forward. I- Kelly, we've talked about the pandemic, and one of the things I've noticed, and several other people who've been on the show have too, the great influenza of 1918 is almost missing from the history books. It's missing from literature, what was written at the time. And do you think the same thing is going to happen to the COVID pandemic that we're going through now? Will we see
No,
it
no, I
in?
think we can already see that it's not. There's already pandemic literature out there. I don't know about the, I do not know about traditional publishers, but generally their books that they purchase or from a writer don't get published for 18 months, 2 years.
Mhm.
So, and I do think that cautionary. I have a friend who wanted to write about the when the dam broke in Louisiana. I forget how many years ago that was, and she had a wonderful, wonderful book about it. But and it was fiction, and the publisher said, no, it's too close, it's too raw, we couldn't get anybody to buy it. And I think they were wrong, they were just being cautious.
Mm.
So I do think with the freedom we will see, and the publishers will be looking, okay, these indie authors are being successful at this. Okay, now it's safe to come out with a pandemic book. And I think we're already seeing that, right, with the zombies.
Yes.
So it's almost unfair to say, would we see a pandemic book, because we've been seeing them. But I think it might be different because experiencing it is very different from, because it was a little bit boring, wasn't it?
The
Wasn't that
pandemic.
surprising? Yes.
Yeah, the pandemic has been very boring. I will certainly go along with you on that one.
It's like there are no people battering down my house trying to eat me. Um, even, I'm not seeing bodies in the streets.
Yeah.
It's not the bubonic plague for sure,
Yeah.
but it's
No.
scary.
Oh, it is. It is. It shut down our social lives. It shut down our cultural life. It's polarized us politically. Probably not the only excitement that's come out of it.
Yeah. Although a lot of people have enjoyed being at home. There's some people who do. My husband loves to watch YouTube videos, and there's this couple that does YouTube videos, and they did a cute little one about um, he's really looking forward to, like poker night, and she's pretending to look forward to the things, and then she's like, but I have to get out of my pajamas. And it's like, there's still that, right?
There is. There is. So, what have you been reading during the pandemic, Kelly?
So, because of the social unrest, I started thinking, I don't read enough authors of color. And so I've been doing that more intentionally. And, I like my genre. So I've read a great zombie fiction. What's her name? I should have written it down. I thought I would remember it. Justina. I don't know. It's Dread Nation. It's the name of the
Hmm?
book, and it's really wonderful because she talking of zombies, she postulates um, zombies at the Civil War era totally changing the whole dynamic, and she's a young Black woman who uh, doesn't really take much nonsense, and she's a very refreshing character. But she's also a zombie hunter and fighter. And when I first saw it, I come across these things in the library, and I like save, and then eventually it comes onto my list. And this one, I just had read the opening part, and I'm like, oh, she's a good writer, and she kept me really interested. And then I'm reading The House Girl right now, which is about a slave who wants to run away, and it has like the historical component, and then it has a modern day component where the lawyer is working on a reparations case. And I thought, oh, that is really interesting. First of all, I didn't know that much about reparations cases. And so they're making this like big, I don't think it's been made, it's just fiction.
Mhm.
But it just, I like the discussions of that. And I also like finding out about, like, I really like historical fiction that's well researched, especially, trying to figure out, well, anyway, why we're such a misogynistic world. I'll just say it.
Go right ahead. We've been trying to get our heads around that one for a long time.
Well, you look at Greece, and you think of it as very monolithic, but it really wasn't. It had the Athenians and the Spartans in it, and you couldn't really have two more different crowds if you tried.
Hmm.
So I just like humans, right? And so I like people who go back and look at history, and I like actual real world the discoveries, the archaeological discoveries that are being either refound or looked at. And my favorite things are finding out about, and I can't remember the name of this. It was turned into a movie about the computers who were women, many of them women of color, who actually did the calculations to get us to space.
Oh yes, yes.
Who
The
ever heard about that? But some writer somewhere heard about it and knew it would make an interesting story. And I'm sure they had a battle to sell that. Because I'm sure, I mean, my instincts tell me that they tried to sell it in the most boring way possible. They were called computers, but they were really people. That's just robots. No, no, you didn't understand.
Yeah, it sounds like a bunch of geeks behind it. Yeah, I know what you mean. But yeah,
But they got it through, and that was an amazing story.
yeah, didn't they make a movie out of that too, I think.
Yes, they did. And they changed some of the real facts because that's what books and movies do. But we have to root for people, right? If we had the real story, it would happen so slowly we wouldn't notice it, which I think is part of what happened.
No, no, that's true. Well, that's a very good list, and hopefully for our listeners out there, you'll check out some of those books. Let's talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room when writers are involved. Amazon. Do you think that's been a help or a hindrance to writers during the pandemic?
That's a really interesting question. I think Amazon um, was definitely a mechanism to let readers get I mean, writers find their readers without needing a whole monolithic publishing industry. And I also think that Amazon has a business model that doesn't necessarily benefit writers who are not willing to do the work, who want the easy money. It's
Hmm.
very easy to put your book up on Amazon and feel like you did something. Um, so I'm not an Amazon basher, but one of the things you see is Amazon in the pandemic did a fantastic job getting people their stuff without having to leave the house. And they have created a couple of models for readers that don't serve writers. Like Kindle Unlimited is fantastic for readers in that you can just read as many books as you want to for, I don't know how much it is. It used to be $9.99, but it's not very much. As a reader, if you're a voracious reader, you like that. Even the library, my library has a limit. I
Mhm.
can only check out 3 books and I can only hold 3 books. It's terrible. I hate it.
Ooh, that is serious.
Well, that's Maine. What can you say?
Mm.
It's a lot of competition for fewer books. But they just innovate, right? So I feel
That they
like we
do.
should not complain about them. We should watch what they're doing and we should figure out how can we change this or use this to our advantage. So I feel like writers don't have the right to just sit and complain about what someone else is doing. They need to do other things. They need to do the things that are going to serve writers and spend more time doing that than complaining about Amazon doing what Amazon's going to do. I mean, Amazon is going to do the business model that works for them.
That they will. Yeah, I think it's still very early in the game to see what the long term effect of Amazon's going to be. We've seen what they've done to retailing. A lot of small bricks and mortar shops are gone. Uh, even Borders, took it on the chin because of Amazon. So I think we've got a ways to go, and certainly Kindle Unlimited and some of their other projects are. It's something I don't think anybody ever could have imagined just a few years ago. So I think the
Well,
jury's
they're
still out there.
into this serialized fiction now, and I'm really curious to see what's going to happen. I'm not hearing good things about it, but that doesn't mean anything. I haven't tried it. As a reader, it doesn't really interest me. I think I like a nice big fat book.
It almost goes back to the old days of Charles Dickens, where some of his great masterpieces were released one chapter at a time each week in whatever magazine he was writing for.
See, as a writer, that actually appeals to me because writers really can use a lot of motivation, and motivation where it's readers who want to read it is good motivation. Although
Hmm.
you can see with certain writers, like I was just reading about Pat Rothfuss and George R. R. Martin, not being able to get their latest books out for like 5 or so years.
I'm still waiting for Rothfuss.
And there was an actual uh, agent who weighed, I think it was an agent, it might have been an editor who weighed in and said they don't owe you anything. And I'm like, I don't think that's true. I mean, I think they promised you something. They should, have a really good excuse for why they're not giving it. And, it doesn't have to be, that their hands were cut off. It just has to be that, they're struggling to figure out how to do it well. That's okay with me. Or they've run out of inspiration and they're waiting for it to hit again. True, whatever. But just to say, oh no, you don't, I don't owe it to you. I just got you all the way through this series. Now I'm just going to dump you. Um, I, so I'm sympathetic on both sides, and I think that if they
It,
had been, I think if either of them had been doing serialized fiction, they might have stopped sooner rather than later. And so that would be a bad thing. Whereas other authors are going to be motivated to finish it because they're getting the reader interest.
yeah, I also think that Rothfuss and Martin made a ton of money, so they don't feel the urgency of finishing what they started.
So I have to be honest, I don't think it's the money. I think it's the pressure. I think it's the story pressure. Because, as a writer, those characters live in your head. You've got to do them all justice. I mean, I have read all of the George R. R. Martin. I was like an early fan. A funny story, I actually got his first book in that series, which I'm forgetting, Game of Thrones. Um, so I was at a Romance Writers of America conference, and they always give out books, and usually they give out, romance or mystery. But so we all go sit down at our table, and we're like, we picked up the, the doorstopper of Game of Thrones, and people are like, I don't want this. I'm not going to bring this back in my suitcase. And I'm like, I'll take it because I didn't get it. I got Game of Thrones for free, and I think I had read it before the end of the conference. And my roommate had also gotten it and read it before the end of the conference. And we were hooked after that. So, you know, it's just that whole situation of readers want, when the worlds are so well written and the characters are like, you're thinking about, well, what happened? We want that next one. And not all writers do that as well as, and I haven't read Rothfuss, but I have heard that he does that world building as well.
Oh, he does an incredible job. I've read both books, and I'm waiting for the third. And my big fear is he's going to do a Sue Grafton on us and kick off before he finishes.
Sorry. So I will have to say, for Sue Grafton, I thought she did it really classily. You know, she finished Y, and then she's like, you know, I don't have much time left. I'm spending it with my family. To
Yep.
me, that's what I'm talking about when, you know, she's like fully admitted, I gave you this promise. I was going to get you to Z, but I can get you to Z, or I can spend time with my family first. And I was like,
Right.
I'm totally on board with that.
Yeah, I am too. And many of us really didn't know how ill she was until her death was announced. And there's the disappointment that she's gone. She was a she was a great writer. Um, and it's just, there's always going to be that missing book at the end there. And I just hope nobody ever tries to write it, because it'll never be the same.
You know, and this is what I know, that publishers will do that, right? So I think she's told them not to. I mean, with a little more clout than telling them not to, because if she just said it, they'd ignore her. So she must have had some kind of contractual control to prevent that.
Apparently she did, and she also told her children that if anybody tried to continue the series after she was gone, she would come back and haunt them. So
And it, Kinsey actually had a lot of. Have you read the whole series?
I've probably read about the first 10.
Okay, so I read all the way through, and Kinsey actually does. I think she's got most of the closure she needs by Y. So I'm not aching. It's like she's not standing on top of a cliff where I don't know if she's gonna jump or
Mm-hmm.
get rescued by the helicopter or whatever. She had a very slow arc. It sort of like what we were talking about with the cozy,
Yep.
where it's very human, right? And so all of those pieces were coming together for her. And I felt like I kind of could see where she was going, and I was good with it, right? I don't feel the same way about the Game of Thrones. It's like, I want to know what's happening to it.
Yeah, well, I've got several of Sue Grafton's books on my to be read pile, my digital to be read pile. So I'll try to catch up with them maybe this winter, because I do want to know what happens.
But she's one of those writers who likes to take 5 years. And, I don't think rushing her would have been at all beneficial.
Yep, no, you're right. You're
I
right.
think that's true even for indie authors.
Even if you look at Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and the Sherlock Holmes series, I used to do a lot of traveling for a living. And once I took the complete Sherlock Holmes with me on a trip to the Far East, and I read from the first story to the last story. The quality of the last several stories was really bad as compared to the early to the middle Holmes stories. So, yeah, I think if Sue Grafton or any other writer had just rushed the book just to get it done, it would have been a disservice to herself and the series and to the fans. A little mystery is always a good thing.
Yeah, and I do think that the best authors can recognize that, can get the time, and give themselves the time they need despite the pressure. As I remember when the Harry Potter books were coming out, my kids were huge fans, and actually the whole family were huge fans. And she delayed, I forget whether it was 4 or 5, for a year, because she was pregnant and she just wanted to, actually like take care of her health and get.
I remember that.
And it was shocking. People were
Yes.
complaining, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe she must have had a good agent who made sure that she could do that, because I'm sure her publisher was saying, "Well, we'll finish it for you. We'll get a ghostwriter to do the," and of course she was like, "Of course you're not going to do that. This is my
Huh?
book, and I'll do it myself."
Oh, good for her. Good for her. Well, Kelly, we're coming to the end of our time now. And I'd like to thank you for coming on. This has been a really good discussion with you about your work, your life, and what's happening in the world of mystery writing these days. And I hope to have you back again when your next book comes out.
Well, thank you. I
Okay?
appreciate that, and this was really fun. I loved your questions.
Oh, well, thank you. So, I'd just like to say to my audience, thank you all for joining us. I'd like you all to come back and join us next month, please, on Monday, September 20th at 9 p.m. Pacific time or Second Life time. Our guest is going to be Gary E. Ross, who is a member of the board of directors of the Mystery Writers of America New York chapter. He is also an Edgar Award winner for a playwright, and they don't have too many of those around these days. So it should be a very fascinating uh, evening. Please,
What did
please
he
join us.
write? Can I just ask, what did he write as a
Uh,
playwright?
I sadly I haven't completed my research yet for his plays,
I'm going to
but
have to go check them out.
yeah, he's also written a series of books based in Buffalo with a private investigator up there, and they're on my reading list for this month as well. And I've read a couple of excerpts from them, and I'm looking to get a couple of those books under my belt between now and September 20th. And please come back then. You've always a seat for you in the audience. Um, so we're ending now, folks.